I never thought my biggest argument with a neighbor would start with a knock on my door and a completely false accusation that I was stealing his electricity. But that is exactly what happened. And the strangest part was that the person pointing the finger at me was the one hiding something in his own backyard. Looking back now, I still laugh a little because the confidence he had when he accused me was almost impressive. Almost. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I live in a quiet neighborhood outside Cedar Ridge, Colorado, the kind of place where people wave when they drive by, complain about the weather, and mostly keep to themselves. I had lived there for almost 9 years, and I always believed that being a good neighbor meant respecting boundaries, keeping my property clean, and not getting involved in other people's business. Apparently, my neighbor, Travis Holloway, had a very different definition of what being a good neighbor meant. Travis was the kind of guy who always wanted to know what everyone else was doing. He wasn't necessarily a bad person at first, but he had this habit of acting like he was the unofficial sheriff of the street. He kept notes about trash pickup schedules, complained about cars parked slightly too close to the curb, and somehow always knew when someone was making a home improvement change before they even finished the project. Most people just rolled their eyes and ignored him. I tried to do the same. My mistake was thinking he would eventually get bored. It started on a cold Tuesday afternoon in January. I was sitting in my garage working on an old motorcycle I had been restoring when I heard someone pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind of knock that makes you wonder if someone is there to ask for help or collect a debt. When I opened the door, Travis was standing there holding his phone in one hand and looking like he had just discovered the biggest crime of the century. His face was red, his eyebrows were pulled tight, and he didn't even say hello. He just pushed his phone toward me and said, "Look at this." I looked at the screen. It was a photo of his electricity bill. "My power usage doubled overnight," he said. "You want to explain that?" For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. I looked behind him, waiting for a smile, or some sign that this was a strange attempt at humor. Nothing. He was serious. "Travis, what exactly are you asking me?" I said. He pointed toward my driveway. "You've been working late in that garage. Lights on all night. Tools running. Who knows what you got in there?" I stared at him because I couldn't believe where this conversation was going. "Are you seriously accusing me of stealing your electricity?" I asked. He crossed his arms. "I'm saying my power doesn't magically double for no reason." There are moments when someone says something so ridiculous that your brain needs a second to catch up. This was one of those moments. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I thought he had to be messing with me. That only made him angrier. "Don't laugh, Daniel. I'm not stupid. I've been watching things." That sentence bothered me more than the accusation itself. Not because I had anything to hide, but because I suddenly realized this wasn't about an electric bill. This was about him wanting to prove a story he had already created in his head. I told him my garage was connected to my own meter. My electrical system had been inspected when I bought the house, and there was no way I was using his power. But Travis wasn't interested in explanations. He had already decided what happened. "I'm calling the power company," he said. "And if they find out you've tapped into my line, I'm calling the police too." He walked away before I could even respond, muttering under his breath like he was some detective about to expose a criminal operation. I stood there in my doorway watching him leave. And honestly, I didn't know whether to be angry or amused. Part of me wanted to ignore it. I thought maybe after he calmed down, he would realize how absurd the accusation sounded. But another part of me knew this could become a real problem. False accusations have a way of spreading, especially in neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone. And Travis was exactly the type of person who would tell the story before knowing the truth. For the next 2 days, things felt different. A couple of neighbors gave me strange looks. One person casually asked if everything was okay with my electricity, and I knew exactly where that question came from. Travis wasn't just making an accusation. He was building a reputation for himself as the person who had uncovered some kind of wrongdoing. The funny thing was, I wasn't worried about what they would find when the utility company came. I knew my system was clean. What I didn't know was that Travis had accidentally invited someone to inspect the one place he should have been worried about. 2 days later, a white utility truck pulled up in front of our houses, and the moment I saw it, I knew this situation was about to change completely. I just didn't know yet that the person who called them would be the one wishing he never did. When the utility truck stopped between our houses that Thursday morning, Travis came outside before the technician even had both feet on the ground. I swear I had never seen someone look so excited about an inspection. He walked out wearing this confident little smile, arms crossed, like he was waiting for a courtroom verdict where he already knew the judge's answer. The technician, a guy named Marcus, stepped out carrying a clipboard and a small equipment case. He looked like someone who had done this 1,000 times, which honestly made me feel better. He wasn't interested in neighborhood drama. He wasn't there to pick sides. He was there to find facts. "Good morning," Marcus said. "I understand there may be a concern about unusual power usage between these two properties." Travis immediately stepped forward. "Yes, my neighbor has been pulling power from my line." I knew something was wrong. I looked at Marcus and almost smiled because he hadn't even checked anything yet. But Travis was already giving him the ending of the story. Marcus just nodded calmly. "We'll inspect both systems and determine what happened." That sentence seemed to annoy Travis because he wanted confirmation, not an investigation. He wanted someone to walk over, point at my house, and say, "There it is." But that wasn't how it worked. The first thing Marcus did was shut off power temporarily to both homes so he could safely inspect the connections. He checked the meters, looked at the service panels, traced the wiring paths, and examined the connections between the properties. Travis followed him everywhere, maybe 2 steps behind, watching every move like he was assisting in some major federal investigation. Every few minutes, he would make little comments. "You'll probably find something hidden. He runs equipment in that garage all the time. I told you there was something strange going on. I kept quiet because I knew something important." The truth doesn't usually need someone standing beside it yelling. After about 30 minutes, Marcus closed my electrical panel and walked back toward us. Travis straightened up immediately. I could see the excitement on his face. He was ready. "Your system looks completely normal," Marcus said. "No unauthorized connections. No shared lines. No evidence of tampering." For a moment, nobody said anything. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees in the front yards. Travis blinked. "Check again," he said. Marcus looked confused. "I already checked." "No, you need to look harder," Travis replied. "There's got to be something." I remember looking at him and realizing he wasn't looking for the truth anymore. He was looking for a way to protect his accusation. There's a big difference between those two things. Marcus didn't argue. He simply turned around and walked toward the other side of the property line. "Let's take a look at your setup." That was the moment I noticed something change. Travis stopped talking. The confidence disappeared just a little. He followed Marcus, but slower this time. The technician opened the exterior junction box attached to Travis's house. He examined the wiring inside, then paused. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment with someone shouting or dropping something. It was actually much quieter than that. Marcus just stared for a few seconds. Then he reached down and pointed. "Can you explain this?" I stepped closer and saw it too. A thick orange extension cord was coming out from the bottom of the electrical box, running along the side of the house and disappearing behind a row of bushes. Travis immediately changed his attitude. That's nothing." But Marcus didn't respond. He simply followed the cord. We walked around the side of the house toward an old storage shed sitting behind Travis's garage. I had passed that shed dozens of times over the years. It was one of those places you never really notice because everyone has some forgotten corner of their property. But apparently, Travis's forgotten corner was where the entire mystery was hiding. Marcus opened the shed door, and the first thing that hit us was the heat. It was like opening an oven. Warm air rushed out, and inside was a collection of equipment that looked completely out of place. There was a small electric heater running in the corner, a mini refrigerator filled with drinks, and sitting on a table was a cryptocurrency mining machine with several fans spinning and lights blinking. The thing sounded like a tiny airplane engine. I remember looking at Travis and seeing his expression change completely. The man who had arrived at my door 2 days earlier, accusing me of stealing electricity, was now standing in front of his own hidden power setup. Marcus walked inside and looked around. "You didn't mention any of this." Travis laughed nervously. "It's not what it looks like. That machine isn't even active. It's just storage." Marcus didn't argue. He just pulled out his meter and checked the equipment. Then he looked at the readings. "Interesting." Travis shifted. "What?" Marcus turned the screen toward him. "The power usage from this equipment lines up with the spike you reported." Nobody said anything for a few seconds, and honestly, I wish I could say I felt some huge sense of victory in that moment, but what I mostly felt was disbelief. The whole situation was so backwards that it almost became funny. Travis had spent days building a case against me, telling people he had caught someone stealing from him, only to lead the utility company straight to the exact thing causing his problem. Marcus documented everything. He took photos, recorded the readings, and wrote down the details of the unauthorized setup. Travis tried explaining different versions of the story after that. First, he said he didn't know the equipment was drawing that much power. Then he said it was temporary. Then he said he was just testing it, but every explanation sounded weaker than the one before. I didn't say much because, honestly, there wasn't much to say. Sometimes the best response is simply letting reality speak for itself. Later that afternoon, Marcus contacted the power company with the inspection results. The complaint Travis filed against me was officially closed. No investigation against me. No police visit. No apology from Travis either. That last part didn't surprise me. People who are quick to accuse others are not always quick to admit they were wrong. A few days later, an official notice appeared on Travis's front door. It was a violation notice related to unsafe electrical use and an unauthorized power load connected to his property. The same kind of problem he had confidently accused me of creating. After that, things changed between us. Travis stopped making comments when he saw me outside. He stopped watching my garage. He stopped acting like he was the neighborhood detective. But the story wasn't completely over yet, because what happened next divided the neighborhood. Some people thought Travis got exactly what he deserved. Others believed it was just a mistake that went too far. And depending on who you asked, the question wasn't whether Travis was wrong. It was whether someone should be punished for being too confident in a story they believed was true. And that was the part that made me think about the whole situation differently. Because the electricity was never really the issue. The real problem was, what happens when someone cares more about proving they are right than actually finding the truth? After the utility company finished their inspection, I thought the whole thing would disappear pretty quickly. I figured Travis would be embarrassed for a few days, maybe avoid eye contact, and eventually we would both move on. That's usually how things work in a normal neighborhood. Someone makes a mistake, they admit it, everyone forgets about it. But I learned something about people during that whole situation. Sometimes the hardest thing for someone to accept is not being wrong. It's realizing they were so certain they were right that they never stopped to question themselves. Travis wasn't just upset about an electricity bill. He had built an entire story in his head where he was the person protecting the neighborhood, and I was the person who needed to be exposed. Once someone puts themselves in that role, admitting they were wrong feels almost impossible. A few days after the inspection, I noticed a lot of small changes. The neighbors who had been quietly watching everything happen stopped asking questions. The people who had heard Travis's version of the story started hearing the actual version. And slowly, the image he had created of himself as the neighborhood investigator started to disappear. Nobody made a big announcement. Nobody held a meeting. Nobody needed to. The truth had already done the work. That's the strange thing about facts. They don't need to be loud. They don't need a crowd behind them. They just sit there patiently until someone finally looks at them. Travis, on the other hand, struggled with it. I would see him outside sometimes, walking around his property, fixing little things around the yard. But he seemed different. The confidence was gone. The same guy who had stood on my porch with his phone in his hand like he was presenting evidence in court was now avoiding conversations. And honestly, I didn't enjoy seeing that. I know people expect these kinds of stories to end with the person who caused the problem getting completely destroyed. But real life is usually more complicated than that. I didn't hate Travis. I wasn't sitting there hoping his life would fall apart. The truth is, I actually felt a little sorry for him, because the biggest thing he lost wasn't money from the fine or the equipment in his shed. The biggest thing he lost was trust. Once you accuse someone of something serious without evidence, you can't just erase that moment. People remember how you made them feel. They remember when you chose suspicion over a simple conversation. Looking back, I think about how different everything could have been if Travis had handled that first day differently. Imagine if he had knocked on my door and said, "Hey Daniel, something strange happened with my electricity bill. I know you work in your garage sometimes, and I was wondering if you noticed anything unusual." I would have helped him. I probably would have walked outside with him and checked the obvious things. We might have figured it out together in 20 minutes. Maybe we would have even laughed about it afterward. But instead, he arrived already angry. He didn't come looking for an answer. He came looking for someone to blame. And that is where everything changed. Because once you accuse someone, you create a fight. Once you ask for help, you create a conversation. A few weeks later, I finally saw Travis near the shed that caused all the trouble. The door was open, but everything was quiet. No buzzing fans, no bright lights, no strange humming sound coming from behind the walls. Just an empty little storage space sitting there like nothing had ever happened. I stood there for a moment thinking about how much drama came from that one small room, a few $100s of extra electricity, a misunderstanding, and one person's need to prove he was right turned into a neighborhood issue. It was almost unbelievable. Travis noticed me looking and gave me a quick glance. For a second, I thought maybe he was going to say something. Maybe he would finally acknowledge what happened. Maybe he would say, "Daniel, I owe you an apology." But he didn't. He just looked down and continued organizing things inside the shed. And strangely enough, I wasn't angry anymore. I realized I didn't need that apology to know what happened. The facts were already clear. The inspection proved it. The records proved it. The equipment sitting inside that shed proved it. Sometimes closure doesn't come from hearing someone admit they were wrong. Sometimes closure comes from knowing you stayed calm while someone else exposed themselves. After that, I became a little more careful about neighborhood relationships. I still believe most people are good. I still believe neighbors should help each other. But I also learned that kindness needs boundaries. You can be friendly without allowing someone to make you the villain in their story. You can be patient without accepting unfair treatment. And most importantly, you can defend yourself without becoming the same kind of person who attacked you. The whole experience also made me think about how often this happens in everyday life. Maybe not with electricity, maybe not with a hidden machine in a shed, but with rumors, assumptions, and people deciding they know the truth before they have all the information. Someone sees something unusual and immediately creates a conclusion. Someone hears a rumor and spreads it before checking the facts. Someone decides another person must be guilty because it fits the story they already believe. And once that happens, the truth becomes almost irrelevant. That's what happened to Travis. He wasn't investigating a problem. He was protecting a belief. And when reality showed him he was wrong, reality didn't apologize. It simply stood there and waited for him to accept it. So whenever I walk past that shed now, I don't think about the accusation anymore. I think about how important it is to ask questions before making judgments. I think about how much damage a few careless words can cause. And I think about how lucky I was that the truth didn't require me to fight for it. It just required someone willing to open a box, follow a wire, and look at the facts. Now I want to know what you think. If you were in my position, would you have accepted Travis's apology if he eventually gave one? Or would the accusation itself have changed the way you saw him forever? Do you think people who make serious accusations without evidence should face consequences? Or should we give them room to admit they made a mistake? Leave your thoughts in the comments because these situations happen more often than people realize. And sometimes the person living next door can teach us the biggest lessons about trust, honesty, and human nature. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more real-life style stories, and share this with someone who believes that no matter how confident someone sounds, the truth always finds a way to come out.